Overtired. So tired. Overtired.
Hello, brand new America. This is the Overtired podcast. I'm Jeff Severns Gunsel. I got Christina Warren with me. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Jeff.
And if you follow Brett on social media, and maybe if you don't, you will now know that he is having some health issues. And we wish him so well. He is not here with us.
He is not here with us. He's with us in spirit. We hope that he's doing well and that we figure out, hopefully, by the time this episode goes up, he'll be closer to figuring out why he's been having some fainting spells and some other stuff, which is super, super scary. So, and a fucking terrible week for it. I mean, it's a terrible week in general, but like of all the weeks for to have like a health crisis on top of everything else.
Yeah. It's like the only week that would also explain that particular health crisis.
It's true.
I'm not saying I'm definitely not saying that's what it is.
No. It doesn't seem to be, but totally. Yeah. It is one of those things. Well, the thing is, if it hadn't started like before Tuesday, I think that would have been like if I were the ER doctor, I'd be like, are we sure this isn't just a stress response?
Right. Yeah. Are we sure there's not people across America passing out consistently right now?
Right.
Feel better, Brett. And
we love
it just
you.
sucks, and hopefully he figures it out. And if you do follow him on social media, send him well wishes, and hope that he posts no more photos of himself from the ER.
Yeah, for real.
Those are so sad.
And it's very sad. And if you're either a doctor or an armchair doctor, please respond to him with suggestions for how you can solve his medical problem without actually knowing what his symptoms and situation is, because I know he will love that.
That's a little special request he sent through us.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And we like to take care of him.
We do. Just say that, Christina and Jeff wanted to make sure that he doesn't get any sleep.
Yeah, definitely. And if you've Googled this thing or something, let him know the first thing you see, because that's sometimes the best thing.
Yeah, it's never the worst. It's never going to freak anybody out or like take them down another sort of spiral. It's never going to do anything else. No,
Nope.
Please don't actually do that. And Brett, if you're listening to this, please don't like WebMD yourself. Like we all know the fear of, or at this point, fuck. Okay, mind fuck. People are, because I'm already probably thinking of doing this. People aren't going to WebMD themselves anymore. They're just going to chat GPT their symptoms.
Yeah. Which it can be not helpful. Probably can be helpful in some scenarios, but can be not helpful. And you can't know is the point.
Exactly. I was going to say, like, I actually firmly believe that if you had a really good medical LLM or like a medical version of ChatGPT, which frankly, that's what OpenAI should do. They should start making like specialized, like off the shelf things specifically for certain industries that are models that are tuned similar to like GitHub Copilot, like where things that are like, hey, this is tuned on medical analysis and information, and we can have statistical data and we can refine the parameters so that certain functions are not happening, non-deterministically, but are actually happening on a deterministic system. So like math and things like that are always going to be correct, but we can make sure that like the training data is good. Like I could actually see, that being already doctors are using it, and they've used, things for years to be able to kind of like run through symptoms and try to get, things back. But like you could see, and that being a really, really good like diagnostic and like
totally
analysis tool, right? And even for like lay people, if you even had like again, OpenAI, like make the medical grade one for the doctors, but then also make like a home version where like people can pay like $40 a quarter in addition to their ChatGPT, plus bill, and they can get like the personal, MD sort of thing, and like get like, like talk to your doctor about this. But like, I mean, I guess you'd have to get HIPAA compliance, but anyway, I'm coming up with all kinds of business ideas for OpenAI.
We're going to be rich by the end of this podcast, probably.
No, I mean, it won't be, but like, and God only knows like what it'll cost them to actually run those things. But
what about just
anyway.
what if our goal can be by the end of this podcast is just have a little walking around money?
That would be great.
Yeah, I guess that's what the sponsor gives us, is a little bit of walking around money.
Yeah.
There's a funny my there's somebody in my life who was in the ER recently. I won't give any indications, but she gave birth to me. Um,
Uh-huh.
and she got tested for something and then was reading the results because, you're in the ER and you have results, but you're still waiting for a room for somebody to talk to you. You can't help but look at them. And she texts me and she says I have a collapsed bladder. I'm eager to know what that means. And I was like, yeah, no, probably it doesn't mean anything bad because medical language is funny. And what occurred to me is it might mean that you just don't have any pee. And sure enough, she got to the doctor. She's all worried about it. They're like, collapsed bladder. What does it mean? He's like, "Oh, it just means your bladder's empty." Oh, right.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing. Yeah, see, and that's
doesn't
actually
sound good.
no, no, but see, that's actually a great example again of like a personal, like medical, like jargon thing. Like, what does this mean? Like,
Yeah.
honestly, even putting aside, okay, genuine like product idea, and it doesn't have to be OpenAI. Anybody could do this because in this case, you wouldn't have to be necessarily. I mean, it would be better if you were fine tuned on like medical books and things like
Yeah.
that. But it wouldn't strictly even have to be. So just having like a well tuned kind of like personal explainer be like, I can type in what this medical term is from my doctor's office, and this is going to tell me in real language what it actually is.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I'm sure she could have seen this on Google, although she didn't seem to. I'm in Chat GPT, or in the most recent Roderick on the Line, John Roderick called it Chatty G, which is really amazing. And
Oh fuck
it's
yeah,
so in
John.
my head that when I opened
Chatty
Alfred
G.
just now, I started typing Chatty G.
Amazing. I mean, honestly, I kind of want to like make that my alias for it.
Oh, so good. I know. It was just my thought, like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do that. Um, Ooh, collapsed bladder, often referred to as bladder prolapse or a cystocele, occurs when the bladder drops from its normal position in the pelvis and presses against the vaginal wall. This typically happens when the muscles and tissues supporting the bladder become weakened. That's all an empty bladder, says Chatty G.
Yeah, I was gonna say Chatty G seems like a very different thing. So maybe
Huh.
not. Maybe this is not.
How about this?
Maybe we're not having a good idea. Like we're
How about
learning on
this?
the fly.
Isn't it just an empty bladder? Welcome to Chatty G with Christina and Jeff.
I
Isn't it just an empty bladder, Chatty G? Let's see. Hmm. It can indeed sound like it might refer to it. Wow. It's actually a structure. Well, that's not what the doctor told my mother. All right, let's stop there. And we'll take this to my chart. Um, anyway, so mental health. How about mental health corner is
Yeah,
what are your coping strategies for um the thing, the
yeah.
the
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 election,
disaster?
the disaster. Yeah, I'm curious to hear yours. So I'm going through like the stages of grief and whatnot, and I'm pretty stuck in anger. Um, and but the like the focus of my anger is shifting, and which I feel like that's growth. So
Mm,
so it was obvious to me on Tuesday night, fairly early West Coast time, what was happening. The same way that it was obvious to me in 2016, um, uh, then on East Coast time, like what was happening. And so I started having this sense of deja vu, and you see the numbers coming in, and you see like the polls, and like, look, there can always be upsets, but in general, they follow a typical standard. And like, and 2020 did as well, right? Like it was really close. The thing that was shocking about 2020 was Georgia. I mean, Arizona a little bit too, but Georgia, just the fact that we
yeah.
didn't know and it was so close and that they had to do the recount and that they had to do like the runoff for Senate, right? Like that was
Thank you, Warnock. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And Stacey Abrams and all my
Yes, the
people from
Stacey
Fulton
Abrams.
County.
I'll tell you later why I think of Warnock first, but yes, thank you all those people.
Well, I mean, obviously he was the one running for Senate. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and she, had lost governor. So, which is still amazing that she was able to pull in so many voters. But like,
yeah.
we saw even before it got to that point, like we saw that it was close and we saw, I mean, like virtually tied and that it
Mhm.
was more competitive than we'd ever thought it would be. And so that like 2020 it changed things, right? Like that was different, but like you knew early on that it was going to be like a tightrope, but like you felt good. Like 2016 though, I remember being like, this is bad. She's lost. And I felt the same exact way this time. And so I was, kind of tweeting about it and posting about it on Threads and posting about it on Mastodon and Blue Sky because the world is awful.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and so you have to be all those places and all of them suck.
yeah.
And are and Twitter, the worst one, is the only one that is real time at all. I mean, Blue Sky, I
God,
guess, a little bit, but
that's when
like
I miss Twitter the most, is things like
totally.
election night so much.
Totally. And but Elon has ruined it, and so it's like the worst people in the world are there, but yet the news is there too. So it's one of those fucking mixed things. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of expressing like my anger. Then I'm like, I feel sick. I want to throw up, and I was like, but already I started seeing people doing the whole, well, just put your chin up, kind of attitude,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
continue to
yeah.
fight. And I'm like, go fuck yourself. People are allowed to be mad. And like, that's what I
Yep.
said. I started saying like Tuesday night and then into Wednesday, I was like, let people be mad. Let them feel what they feel. I'm not even
Yep.
saying be angry forever. And to be clear, I'm not saying don't be angry forever because I have some sort of sense of duty about like, oh, we all need to pick ourselves back up and do this and
Yeah,
this and
yeah.
this. No, it's because the anger, it can be fueling and it can be good for a time, but ultimately it can become toxic. And so my whole thing with the anger is purely selfish. It's like, as long as the anger works for you, be angry. But at a certain point, for most of us, anger is no longer a beneficial response,
Yeah.
and it winds up being hurtful. So when I say get rid of the anger, it's not for the other people. It's not to have peace for them. Like fuck them. It's the same way I view forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for other people. It's for yourself.
Yeah.
You
Right.
forgive so that you don't have to live with that, right? And that is, so that you've let it go and it's no longer like eating at you. Like fuck the other
Mhm.
person, right? Like
Mhm.
that's not who it's from. Forgiveness is for you.
Yeah.
And I feel like the
It's not
anger,
even an
like
effective gift in many cases, right? It is
right,
something you have to do for you, and that
you do,
changes
yeah, right,
everything.
exactly, right, because it's like okay, because you can't control whether or not someone forgives you or not, especially if they really do, right? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I forgive you," and then they don't.
Yeah.
They're still holding it through, right? So it's like
Right.
if you've wronged someone, or even if you haven't, but they perceive that you have, like, there's not a whole lot of control you have over that, right? But like, I can control how I feel about a situation with someone else and how much I continue to let it affect me.
Yes.
And I feel the same way about anger, right? But sometimes the anger can be really, really fueling and really, frankly, like can feel good. So, I'm not saying be angry forever, but I am being like, let people fucking feel how they feel and don't immediately go into that, all right, time to get back to work. Like,
Yeah.
first of all,
Yeah.
fuck off. The work didn't work last time and we should really talk about it. And there's enough blame to go around to everybody. But the people I want to hear from the least are the fucking resistance, like libs who have done jack shit for us, in my opinion, over the last 8 years. That's who I'm really kind of pissed at now because I'm
Well, and
like,
it also feels like when people do that, it feels like it's like, are you actually talking to yourself? Because like otherwise, who are you addressing? Everybody? Like,
right,
what is this fight? I mean, give me a minute.
right, right. So anyway, you asked about coping strategies. And my mind is basically just to be like be pissed off, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. I've also been trying to like do some work and do some other things. I've got an insane next 6 weeks of travel planned. I'm going to be in Salt Lake City for KubeCon next week. I'm going to be in Chicago actually the week after that for Microsoft Ignite, so I'll be near you and Brett. Then I'm going to be in
Nice.
Atlanta for Thanksgiving. Then I'm going to be in Seoul for kind of
So
a quick
good
trip. Yeah,
food.
and then I'm gonna be, back for, like, a week. Then I'm going to, Rome, with a friend for a long
Whoa.
weekend, and then then I'll be back in Atlanta for Christmas. So, yeah, like,
That is
the next
insane.
I know. I know, and that was not all of like, 3 of those things came out, like, very recently, so it was not originally supposed to be that hectic, but things were, like,
Yeah.
added on to my plate kind of last minute, and honestly, I was like, "Fuck it, let's do it." Like, when I had the, opportunity last week when I found out that I would, potentially be going to Seoul and it was confirmed this week, I didn't have to go, and given all my other travel, like, honestly, it's kind of a mixed bag whether I should do it or not, but you asked for coping strategies, and I did have the thought last week, I was like, "Depending on how things go, I might really want a distraction," you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
where I'm just going, and I know from when I used to travel like this all the time, so this is going to be like a back to pre-pandemic Christina a little bit. I know that it's a real good way of of avoiding things you don't want to think about or focus
It
on.
sure is.
Is
Yeah.
is just to
Yeah.
be, as you know, from somebody who's traveled a ton and been a bunch of places, and at during times of kind of domestic crisis, it's n- nice to just be busy.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like it can be a great way to avoid things you need to avoid, and it can also be a great way to metabolize things, just to not be in your own four walls, moving, while also metabolizing who he's going to pick for this post or what he's promising
Yeah,
now is actually like for me a better way. I can hold it better than if I'm sitting at home.
totally. No, that's the thing, right? Like, and I think that um I wanna talk to you about how you're coping and what your mental health is like, first. But one thing I think would be interesting for us to talk about would be, um, like, I guess maybe comparing and contrasting, like, how this feels versus other, like, election, like, losses
Yeah.
that, we've kind of gone through. Because when I think about 2016, that was hard for so many reasons, and it was very different than how I felt then is very different from how I feel now. But part of what made that both harder and easier was the fact that I was a journalist. And so it was harder in the sense that, like, you couldn't disconnect from it. Like, there was nothing I
Hmm.
really could do. Like, even not being a political journalist, being like a technology journalist, still, like, there was something about it all the time.
Yeah.
And I worked in a newsroom, and I couldn't get rid of it, right? It was in
Hmm.
your face, and you could not ignore, like, the news dump that happened literally, from the day he was elected up until, and then it got only bigger, once he was
Yeah.
inaugurated and all that.
Yeah.
Whereas
Right.
whereas this time, but and so that made it suck, but at the same time, there was also, like, that busyness of, like, okay, well, there's always a story to write, there's always a thing to do, and so you didn't have to, like, think about it too much.
Hmm.
And I'm curious from, like, your perspective, like, you know, as somebody who, is a journalist, but not, like, in a newsroom quite the same way, like,
No.
if it makes you, if it's easier or harder, like, when you have to think about it all the time, right? Or if it's better to have a distraction. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, in
Yeah.
some ways, like the day-to-day news stuff could be a distraction even if it was about him, whereas almost like it's harder, like once I was no longer in journalism and I was having to, like, actually follow everything that happened, like, as a
Yeah.
layperson, like, in some ways that was almost harder because I was like, the Mueller investigation, all that, I was like, "Okay, I have to either choose to engage or not because, this is gonna, like, I have to find something else to distract me or else this is just gonna be a thing that, like, overtakes my
Right.
brain, and
Right.
that's not helpful."
Yeah. Well, actually, I have an answer to that initially that it ties into kind of my own coping strategies or like the challenges in this election. Like I didn't when I was a journalist, I managed to convince my editors that I would be not only no good at, but deeply resentful about having to do any kind of in the moment coverage of any kind of in the moment politics thing at all.
Mhm.
I'm not the best person for it, and I kind of despise it. I despise the coverage that comes out of it most of the time. Not despise, but like I just wonder why.
Right.
Um, and I know
Fair.
I just feel like I was throwing my life away in dramatics, which is not what I feel about the people who are doing it. I literally is what would happen inside of me if I were doing it. Um, and so it's much better for me to be able to fully manage the way that I follow and metabolize and everything, this stuff. Though I have really good friends who are journalists where it's like they would never say it because you're not supposed to say stuff like that, but that is how they metabolize it and they need
Right.
it and is their coping strategy. And I 1,000% respect that and they do great work with it. But for me, like even so we had some really great friends, these two couples that my wife and I have been close with through getting to know through our kids were friends, and then we've just been like friends since our kids were in kindergarten. So I love them. I love being around them. And one of them was hosting kind of just us and them basically to watch the election results and have a dinner. And I knew instantly I don't do those things. But I also knew that it's really good to be with people you love on a hard night. And so I was like, I'm just gonna do the dinner and which is what I did. But like even there doing the dinner, what is so difficult to me, and it's not unlike the journalism thing and why that doesn't work for me, is like I am managing my own kind of anxiety, my own hopes, my own fears, all that stuff, and I'm doing it in whatever way is like very much me. And the way I do that stuff is it's very inward. It's very like in my head. So I can actually, I can be scrolling back in the day. I could be scrolling Twitter, but I needed to be doing it alone. And have like utter control because as soon as I have other people in my ear processing in their way, and some people process by constantly looking up information and sharing it out while you're watching the TV, which is already putting all this like useless information graphics that make it look like something big has just happened, but nothing's just happened. Um, and so like that stresses me out so much. So I actually did something this year that I have never done, and I'm really glad I did it. And I'm not putting it out there as some like this is what we all should have done. This is a wise thing. Cause often when people suggest what I'm about to suggest, it comes in a very fucking annoying package. Um, but I got home from that election party thinking I was going to turn on the TV and just watch it with my wife and, whatever. I actually got home and I'm like, I'm not turning anything on. Like, I'm really fucking tired. I haven't been sleeping well,
Mm-hmm.
probably not unrelated to this. There's nothing I can do but hit my nervous system over and over again. And it doesn't help me process like it does. Again, I totally respect it helps people I know process, just be watching it with someone, whatever, talking. But I was like, I think this time I got to be no, nothing. So I didn't watch anything. I fell asleep and I woke up at like 3 central. And so I was like, look at the phone. I was like, no, don't look at the phone. Try to go back to sleep. And then I stayed in, don't look at the phone, try to go back to sleep for an hour and a half. And at 4:30, 5:30 Eastern, which is when he did his victory speech, basically, or started it. That's exactly when I turned my phone on. It's like Trump is about to begin his victory speech. And I was like, holy shit. And so anyway, I took that in, got up, couldn't sleep, obviously. Got up, went into my workshop at like 5 a.m., sorted work gloves, and then just was like, I'm not taking in any news for the first half of the day. And I didn't. And then I started and I was ready. So one coping strategy, pre-coping strategy was just to like totally unplug, which is not my
Yeah.
nature.
Right.
Um,
But you needed
and
to.
oh my God, I needed to. But then to your point and to some of the points of your Mastodon posts that I appreciated, as soon as I logged in, it was like, now we fight, now we fight. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna go ahead and take a rest. I'm not like I've known fighting in my days. I'm not I'm not averse to fighting. I'm not a
Sure.
complacent person, but I also know that I know what it's like to destroy yourself. And I've watched other people destroy themselves. And I've watched people figure out that rest is a really important part of being in any kind of fight.
Yeah.
And this is the time. We got a minute. We got a minute to rest. It's over. We're not contesting this thing, right? Like, we got a minute, and
Right.
it is. And to your point, however anyone needs to do this, need to do it. And so when I see people saying fight, fight, fight over and over, I'm kind of like, there's a part of me that's like, I mean, I get it, I respect it. I'm not again. There's no way of responding to this thing that I disagree with exactly because I think everyone's doing it the way they need to. But social media is different because you're being told things all the time, people
Exactly.
telling you. And so it's just like I tuned in for like an hour. First thing I saw was actually your post being like, you know what? No, you can just feel what you're gonna feel. You don't have to fucking fight right now. Like you had a great post, which I'll link to in the show notes. That was the first thing I saw when I came on. And then I saw all the fight things. I was like, Christine, I think yours the only social media post I liked in that entire like hour that I was on. So yeah, I mean, there was also just that part of like, you really have to trust yourself. Like, really have to trust yourself. Like, if people saying now we fight doesn't feel good right now, it's
Right.
fine. You're not complacent. You're not
No.
anything. You just,
And
you,
and
you
and, and
can't actually fight good if you're not in a good place anyhow.
no, and it's not a failure to be like, no, I'm
Yeah.
taking a breath, right? Like that's not a moral weakness or anything. And in fact, I think some people would say when you lose, which like to be clear, like the Democrats like lost, lost,
Yeah.
lost, lost, like
Lost.
lost.
Yeah.
Like this was, like a repudiation and a referendum, right? Like this was a loss. There was like
Yep.
2016 was, I guess now I can talk about like my theories about like how like this is different from prior
Yeah. Do it.
things. But like but just to close the thought here, like when you lose like this, like for anything, whether it's like a sports team or it's like you get, you lose a job or like something happens like in, leadership or whatever, like, like you lose a big deal, like whatever the case may be, like the normal thing to do is to like reassess. And I'm not saying we need to have the whole postmortem now, but like sure, don't give up and continue keeping on. I can be down with that idea, but I'm also kind of being like, okay, if the same strategy has not worked for, let's say, 5 elections, just putting that out there.
Yeah.
I don't know, in kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
when I let's just I don't know. Like let's just say that if that has if something isn't working, maybe it's time while you're like before you get back up and fight to reassess like what you want your tactics to be. And that, to your point, I think does require some like reflection. And look, if people feel better because they want to, express the platitudes of fighting and doing whatnot, look, I'm not going to tell you how to feel. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm
Yeah.
just not going to be shamed into immediately jumping on like the toxic positivity, like rhetoric of being like, oh, we got this and everything will be fine. No, we don't actually know, right? And it's okay for people to be fucking mad. Um,
Yeah.
I got so pissed off. I mean, this was some motherfucker on Twitter, so what do you expect? And I didn't engage other than, like, my one response, but, like, when I did tweet, like, Tuesday night, I was like, "People are allowed to, be mad, let them feel how they feel," and he was like, "Anger is one thing," or whatever. He was like, but, he said, like, burning buildings and some other thing is another, and I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I
Already
was
with
like,
this. Yeah.
already, and this was, like, Tuesday night. I was like,
Yeah.
"What the I mean, if I
Hello from
really want."
Minneapolis.
Right, exactly. Well, but what I wanted to be like is I wanted to be like, we're not the group of people who refuse to accept results,
Yeah,
and we're not
exactly.
we're not the people who like, like storm the Capitol. Because I knew what he was dog whistling to, but I was like, actually, what that really made me think of was January 6th, and we will not do that. But I was like,
Yeah.
what kind of bullshit escalation is that, right? Like, no one's saying that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? Like, but that honestly kind of like put me in like a fucked up sort of even notion, just be like, this is how fucked up the world we live in is that there are people who, to be clear, this guy sucks, but like, and it was a dog whistle and the whole thing was bullshit, but like, where the rhetoric is such that saying something as simple as like, you're allowed to be mad, people can, for him, it's not in good faith, but for some people it could be like, yeah, so a way some people respond to that is to try to burn it down and have a coup. Like,
Yeah. Right.
that's
Right.
fucked up, right? But like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's the reality we're in. Okay, so anyway, here's my theory about how like this is different
All
from
right.
like 2016. So 2016, I think for a lot of us, for most of us, was a shock. And even if you had like a sinking feeling that Trump might win, and even if you'd like thought that he was more competitive than the media, mainstream media, especially political media, gave him credit for a long time, and that like he was a real like force to be reckoned with. Like even if you had a bad feeling, the polling, everything indicated that Hillary was going to win. And then when she didn't win, but she did win the popular vote, right? Which, was similar to like a Bush v. Gore thing, but in this case it was like decisive, like it was obvious. Like that was almost like there was this huge shock, right? And how did this happen? But there was also this not comfort, but like this, I guess, additional kind of like sense of kind of like outrage, which is like, okay, but the electoral college is should not be a thing that we do anymore. And like this is the second time now in 16 years that we have a different outcome from the different popular vote and electoral college makeup. And like this is clearly not the will of the people,
Hmm.
collectively, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't remember the number, but like millions more people had voted for
It
her
was a
than for him.
huge gap. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, so it came down to, just the bullshit electoral college system. And so that like you had the shock, but then you also had like in a sense you were like, okay, but this is not the will of the people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not what the
It made
majority
it
voted
less
for.
confusing.
Right. In some ways it made it like that much more shocking and like upsetting, but at the same time you were kind of like, okay, well this is not the will of people. And then in 2020, again, like won the popular vote by a large margin. And um obviously it became very, very close and came down to a couple of states. And Georgia really did come down to the hand votes. But although even then, like there was enough buffer or whatever. But, like if Georgia or Arizona had been lost, like Biden still would have
Yeah.
won. But
Yeah.
like but you still had that thing. You're like, okay, the people did not vote for this, right? Like,
Yep.
from electoral point of view, from a like
Popular
populist,
vote.
whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
any popular vote point of view. But this time, a it wasn't the same shock, at least for me. Because again, like I felt the spidey sense. I was like, I know what this feeling is like. I'm having deja vu. Like this is what's happening. You can see the things come in when I saw every single swing state, every single one,
Yeah.
come in for him and demographics coming out stronger. Like the big thing is that like with 2020, I think that we had a little bit of a false boost where way more people did show out to vote, which is
Yeah.
great. That did
Yeah.
not happen this time. And on
No.
the contrary, where you saw an uptick and an increase in voters was on the Republican side. So their ground game was better.
Yep.
And they got more people out. They got younger people out for them, which the Democrats did not. And then more of them voted right, like
Yeah.
for him. And to me, I was like, what made that like I'll find a thing that I sent to a friend of mine who's Australian. Let me find this if we want to put
Ooh,
it
engaging the Australians. That's always good for like balancing out any feeling. I love the Australians.
Me too. My friend it was lovely and like reached out to me at like midnight my time, and so I don't even want to know what time it was, for him the next day, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was like 2 a.m. your time, and so very early or very late for him. And he's like, hey, I'm really sorry. I hope you're doing okay. And I said, thank you. And he says, he was like, I don't even know what to say. And uh, I said, "I don't either. I wish I did." So I wish I was more surprised. I thought it would hurt less this time. The shock
Mhm.
value of 2016 isn't there, but it's still just as depressing this time. We know some of the outcome, and it's not
Mhm.
good. And it's like,
Mhm.
what do you even say? We can't even blame the Electoral College this time. This was the will of the electorate, full stop. And that's almost as upsetting as these people winning again, that this was
Yeah.
such a decisive blowout. And
Yeah.
and so that was the real thing that for me. I was like, this was the will of the electorate.
Yep.
It was.
Yep.
And so what it reminded me more of and like how I felt both Tuesday night, but especially Wednesday, what I kept feeling like, and I think I posted about this as well. I felt exactly the same way I did when I had just voted in my first election in 2004 and John Kerry lost. And he
Mhm.
lost badly, right? Like he lost about as
John
badly
Kerry
as
was
he
never
lost about
gonna
as badly
save
as Kamala
us.
did. Yeah,
Ugh.
right? I mean, but like yeah, totally I mean that didn't help, but like, the whole thing, he wasn't he never connected with people. That campaign was flawed for a lot of reasons. But in that case, I was a college student. It was my first election and I was angered in a way where I was like similar to this. I was like, we have um, a criminal and his cronies, and a liar who we already know who this motherfucker is, and we've
Yeah.
reelected him, right? And that was how
Right.
I felt in 2004. I was like, we know who George W. Bush is. Like, you could make an argument, I guess, in the year 2000, why people might have voted for Bush. Didn't really know much about him other than who his dad was, and he was governor of Texas, and Al Gore ran a very bad campaign, and really wanted to try to separate himself from Bill Clinton, which wound up being a mistake regardless, right? Like
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and he doesn't have charisma. And so, like,
Oh, doggy. No.
no, but, and unfortunately, George W. Bush does. And,
Yeah.
but so you can understand how, even though that was literally came down to hanging chads and again, Al Gore won the popular vote, like you could see, okay, people didn't know what they were voting for. But then
Yeah.
after that, when we're in the
Yep.
middle of this war,
We
right?
knew that we were voting for a con man and a liar and a
Yep.
incredible warmonger. Even if you generously say he was puppeted to be a warmonger, he was that person.
He was that puppet. He was that puppet. And you're
Yeah.
still and you're also voting for the puppet master, right? Like even if you
Yeah,
believe
man.
even if you believe that Cheney is the one pulling on the strings, well then you fucking voted for Cheney, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely
and
did.
and so
We knew who
I
he was.
absolutely nobody was under any illusions about that, right? Which is again why like promoting the fact that, like, Cheney's endorsing. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it.
Oh, I know. It's like, oh God, everybody just settled down on that.
Exactly. It's like this is not going to win you any votes on either side, right? Because no one. This is somebody no one likes. And no one wants to hear from. But that was the thing, right? It was that I was so young, and it was my first election, and I had just this feeling of kind of like heartbreak, because I was like, and what was most heartbreaking wasn't that it didn't go my way, but I was like, this was the will of the people. People know what this is, and they say we don't care.
Yep.
We would still rather have this than this other thing. And that's a hard thing to grapple with. And so that's what this reminds me of. Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in some ways it hurt. In some ways this hurt a lot more. That hurt more than 2016. And I feel like this hurts now too, because again, for all the anger that I'm still having right now at like the fucking Democratic Party and the fact that maybe if we'd had a candidate who'd had more than 100 days to run a campaign, we would have done better, right? Like in some regards, like I can be kind and be like, I never voted for her in the primary. I didn't think she should be VP, and she would not have been my pick to be on the ticket here. However, I thought, actually did a great campaign for what she had, especially the time that she did. She did way better than I thought that she, would. And I have to like be honest about that. It was not enough, but I also, a certain amount, I'm like, only about a quarter of it can be attributed to her. The rest of it is like things outside of her control, right? Because she was kind of put into a shitty position too, right? Where it's like, well, what are you going to do? Are you not going to take the, like, who else can they nominate at that point when, guy drops out 100 days before the election? Like, what else can happen? You don't have time to do a real primary. And, unless you want to drag things out even worse, which would make things even worse, you have to put up the VP. And she herself has to probably be thinking, well, this is my only shot at ever being president, because I'm sure as hell, never going to win a normal primary. And, like, this is a long shot, but I've got to do it, right? So like she was kind of put in a shitty position, and she did better than I thought she would. But like, is putting like my anger at like the Democratic Party and all that aside, like you said, that the thing, it hurts, because it's like this was the will of the people, and I can't even be mad just at them, because I feel like there were so many errors made. I mean, I can be mad at some of them, but some of them I can just be like, well, I mean, we know that we are a country of dumb fucks, right? And but this is where we are. And so, yeah. All right. So speaking about like the, dumpster fire that is social media, having to deal with, Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky and Mastodon and anything else, I guess even Facebook, which I was not on, but other things. There is a good antidote to all that, and that is a personal homepage. And so if you've ever wanted your own corner of the web, a place that feels, truly personal, we've got just the thing for you. It is called Pika. That is PIKA. And you can find it at pika.page/overtired. And I think that, Jeff, have you used Pika yourself? Have you tried it out?
Yeah, I spun up a blog. I spun up some posts. Very, very easy, elegant, simple. As the software company is called, Good Enough Software. It was like, good enough. Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. And so it was really easy to create like a beautiful, clean blog or website without any of the usual tech headaches, which, it used to be really easy to like create a blog, and now it's not. And so it's nice that there are services out there like this which help you do that. And so with a Pika Pro plan, you get unlimited pages, blog posts, guest book entries, guest books. How great is that? And even the option to add your own custom domain. It's seriously affordable too, way less than what you would pay for something like Squarespace, which just got bought out by some private equity folks. So no comment. It is also way less complicated than using something like WordPress, and it's a better investment of your time than posting everything to social media, which is what I do. And just for you, we have a special deal. So when you visit pika.page/overtired and decide to go pro, use the code overtired20. You will get 20% off your first year. That is right. That is 20% off Pika Pro's already very reasonable price with all those unlimited features. So if you've been thinking about putting yourself out there online, you can go to pika.page/overtired and start building something uniquely yours with Pika. I know that it's been a game changer for both you, Jeff, and Brett's really liked it too, and we think you'll love it. That is pika.page/overtired. Pika.page/overtired.
And let me tell you something. Here's how easy it is. While Christina was talking, and really only in the last 30 seconds, I went ahead and claimed pika.page/peekaboo,
Haha.
which I
Oh
will
yeah.
release back into the wild after 1 week, but I could not believe that wasn't taken.
You have
And
to.
so
That's so
now
good.
I have it. Yeah, you're gonna have to buy it off me. I am gonna get walking
Peekaboo.
around money by the end of this.
No, exactly. You need some walking around money, and thank you, Pika.page. And also, now I want to see a Pika.page from you/peekaboo. But go to Overtired. Use the code. Thank you, Pika.
Thank you. Yeah, the people who put 14 flags on their car won. I mean, that is, yeah. And the 2004 thing, part of why I was glad for you to say that is like, one of the things that I've really bristled at from the time Trump was first elected is, and I understand why people say this. Everyone's like, wow, this kind of makes George W. Bush look like, someone you might
Yes.
want. I was like, you know what?
Fuck
That
you.
guy, that guy caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of
Yes.
Iraqis. That is the definition of a monster.
Yeah.
And granted, that's also just the machinery of the presidency of an
Sure.
imperial like nation, whatever, right? But like, he didn't have to do that. Everyone agrees now. Everyone agrees now that war was a mistake.
It
And
was based on lies. It was based on lies.
that based on lies, we murdered hundreds of thousands, some say up to 1 million people. We can't really know how many people died that would not have died otherwise, but the estimates are hundreds of thousands to 1 million, right? Like, it's a lot of people. If it was 150,000, which is the lowest estimate, that's a lot of people. And so for me, it's like, yeah, that guy is kind of charming in a kind of dipshit way.
Yeah.
And he does make adorable paintings, and that's really funny.
I was gonna say his art is actually incredible. Like, that's the
Yeah.
fucked up thing. Like, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's super
His
fucked up.
His art is actually profound. Like, his art is profoundly good.
Yeah. But like, that thing of like, yeah, Trump is a monster too. And he's going to ruin lives, and people are really
Yep.
vulnerable, and people are going to be hurt. People we care about are going to be hurt. People that fit into any number of categories that are not sort of the mainstream, like cis white people, whatever, are going to be hurt. There are people that I love and care about and will fight for.
And to be clear, cis
And
white people
that
are
is
also going to be hurt.
awful.
To be clear, they're
Yeah,
also
this is
gonna
why
be hurt.
I know everyone gets hurt a little on this one, probably. And so yes, he's terrible. We don't have to compare them at all.
No.
But I can't stand people softening on George W. Bush because the man was a murderer, and that is not something that gets softened over time.
No.
It should not
It
get softened over time.
No, it shouldn't. We should reject all of it, right? The same way that we should fucking reject Ronald Reagan and like not look back on him with like the rose-colored glasses that even some liberals have, right? I think most people at this point like know enough not to. I mean, obviously, history will forever treat Ronald Reagan great, but people who actually look at like what the impact of his policies were shouldn't. But George W. Bush, like everybody agrees. They agree. Like that war was a mistake. It was based on lies. It never needed to happen. The Iraqi deaths, which are just absolutely monstrous, as you said, but also like selfishly, like my friends, right? Because I was like 18, and when that war started, and like people who signed up, for out of either sometimes in a sense of duty, because of 9/11 or whatnot, but in most cases they'd signed up because they wanted to have college paid for, right? And you have people who were like, your recruiters are telling you, oh, you're never going to go to war. And then they go on 6 duties, right? And then some of them come back and some of them don't, right? I had friends who did not come back home, who did not sign up for that. And it wasn't a draft, but it essentially was. Like if you'd sign up for the, military and you were young enough, like they were going to fucking send you. And
you don't come home or you don't come back all the way.
Right, exactly, right? And it went on for fucking 20 years, right? Like we were fucking stuck there for fucking 20
years. Yes, and that's what that man unleashed, and he is not to be softened on.
Not at all. Not at all. But then I would say, to be slightly hopeful on this, the thing that I think did come out of 2004, and you might have better memories of this than me, especially since you were kind of all over the place, in your perspective on this might be better than mine. From what I recall, that was sort of a wake-up call moment for the DNC. And there was a big reset. And that was how we wound up getting Obama. Now,
Yeah.
ironically, the people that led that reset are the same people that I personally now think we need to have move on,
Yeah. Yeah.
and be replaced, right? But hey, you know what? Like 20 years is a long time to kind of have, like stuff in place. But but from what I recall, and I could be wrong, but like it seemed like it was, you had the Howard Dean people who really were trying to kind of change some things in the
Howard
party from within. Yeah, like
Dean.
the Netroots folks, right? And then he
Yeah.
blew his campaign and didn't, was obviously never going to be the guy. But those people then all shifted to Obama and saw, okay, here's a guy with charisma. Here's a guy who's fantastic, who has, just star quality out the wazoo, who was a star. I think it was the 2004 Democratic National Convention
Yeah.
that was his big
Yeah.
breakthrough speech, right? I
Yep.
mean, that I mean, I think more people remember that speech. Nobody remembers what John Kerry said.
Oh God, no. I'm
But
sure it was not interesting.
no, but people remember Obama, right? And then those people who were kind of coming up, like these new kind of more, at the time we were calling progressive, kind of voices kind of came through, and that became the basis for getting Obama elected in 2008 and 2012. And do I think that those same people should be leading things now? No, I don't. I think that the tactics and the playbook from that era don't work.
Yeah.
And or more to the point, the way that they've been done in the last, 4 cycles doesn't work. But
Hmm.
I, maybe if you took some of those lessons about how, like millennials actually voted for Obama, like I don't know, maybe have a candidate who actually inspires people. I don't know. But
Yeah.
but like just a shock. Or here's a shock. Here's an idea. Have somebody under 60 run. Like that's just
What?
throwing it out there, just throwing it out there, right? And that's not even a dig at Kamala's age or anything. She was far younger than anybody else running, but like, Obama was in his 40s, and
Hmm.
we, we hadn't had that. I mean, I guess Bill Clinton was, but like, like that's it's a very rare thing to have that. It's like we need that again,
Yeah.
especially at this point when we have all this, this old man kind of energy for the last, it's going to be 12 years. But by the time uh, this next term of office is over, remains to be seen
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
the 78-year-old makes it through the whole thing. But regardless, like it'll be 12 years of old men being elected. Um, I don't know. So maybe that's like my sense of hope. Sorry for the pun. Of being like maybe this will be like a wake up call moment where once we kind of reassess, people can be like, okay, now how can we, as a party, as kind of a institution, whatever you want to call the thing, an ideology, how can we like reassess how we actually fucking win? And
Yeah.
maybe you can only do that if you get your ass fucking killed, like, and
Yeah.
beat
Yeah.
in every way that
Oof.
you can be beat.
Yeah. And then looking forward, before we do gratitude, it's
Yes.
just gonna be a funny pivot. Looking forward, I mean, the other part of processing all of this is like fascism is a long haul.
Mhm.
And whether no matter how many of those letters are capitalized in the version that we're gonna get, um, it's a long haul, and it's not the fight or a fight. You got to stay on your feet somehow. Like you can burn out, flame out so fast. And I've known people who live in fascist states, totalitarian states, and I've seen them on the tail end, like Saddam Hussein's Iraq, where and there were certainly people resisting and quietly being killed, but like I've definitely seen the end where everyone's like, look, this is just what is, you know?
Yeah.
And that's because it's so total that you know that your neighbors could rat on you, and that's
Right.
how total it gets, right? And so it's definitely important to know what that can look like, and to look out for signs of it. And I do think, and I know I'm sure you do too, I do look forward and think this is going to be a horror show,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's not as bad as we think, but a lot of times it's bad in ways we forgot to imagine.
Yeah.
And like I part of the resting thing for me is like just being grounded enough to be able to take it all in, and while keeping hold of myself.
Mhm.
I remember thinking especially during the pandemic in the early days when he was giving press conferences every day,
Yeah.
and he was just making us all terrified and everything. I remember my wife and I started doing what we called worry walks. We're like, let's process this motherfucker on the sidewalk so that when we're home, we can just be home. And
Yeah.
so we just take a walk every day and just be like, all right, what are you freaked out about? What are you pissed about this guy? What do we process him? That asshole went on every walk with us for most of 2020. God damn him. And I the thing I keep thinking about too is like how hard it is to keep that guy out of your body,
Yeah.
which has all kinds of meanings, different for women than it does for men, different for me right now than it does for almost, what I'm talking strictly somatically. Like, how do you keep him out of your fucking body? Like, how do you keep him from like moving into your house? Right. Like, and that's the thing that's so one of the such wicked things about him is the way that he takes us all with him. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you don't want to. I was joking with my wife that like Biden should pass an executive order funding the therapy for everybody who didn't vote for Trump for the next at least 2 months because we're going to use it up on the federal government.
Yeah.
And it should be a
Totally.
federal response.
It should be. It should be. No, no, no. And I'm with you. And like and the hard thing is you're right. It's like we want to like how do you keep it out of your body? But at the same time, like because part of me sees and I'm still here, right? I'm still in this place. This is not where I will be in a month. This is where I
Yeah.
am right now. But there's a part of me that wants to be like, okay, fuck it. You voted for this. Let it burn, let it fail. Sometimes the only
Yeah.
way that you
Yeah.
can actually show people
I've felt that.
that sometimes the only way you can show people like what mistakes they've made is if you fucking let it fall apart.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, that was also a lesson from 2004, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of things happened. The war progressively got worse. Then we had the financial crisis and everything else. And like, I think that as much, I mean, obviously Obama ran a great campaign, great person, but he had to overcome being a black man in 2008. And
Yeah.
which
With the
led
name
to
Barack Hussein Obama.
correct, right?
Just to
He had
be
to
clear.
exactly. He had to overcome all of that baggage in a time when, despite what people might want to say, oh, this is the worst time for, types of people. It's like, no, it was actually worse then, right? Like things have actually improved. Like it's hard sometimes to see how much things have improved when things still seem bad and we still seem so far off with equity. But things are better, and things that like rhetoric that people could get away with then you couldn't do now. Like I remember driving through Kentucky in 2008 and seeing people having, I mean, this is awful. I mean, it was one of the things that made me so embarrassed to be from the South, which is something I don't have any control over, to be clear, right? Like I have no choice over where I was raised and where I was born. Like I have nothing to do with that. But like I saw people who had nooses and like stuffed Obama dolls
Mm,
hanging
mm,
from their houses
mm, mhm.
in 2008 in like
Yeah.
September, October 2008, right? And that was the sort of thing like that made me embarrassed to be
Mhm.
in the South. It made me embarrassed to be an American. Like that's the sort of thing like viscerally
It's
like
frightening.
yes, right? And the fact people just doing it on Maine, right? Like forget about people like, "Oh, people are really coming out with their full racism on Twitter and TikTok now." Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. But like let's not pretend people weren't like literally like from their houses, right? In the neighborhoods just
Yeah.
out there, right? Like it was just an acceptable sort of thing. I do think that you would have a much harder time doing that now, right? Which is a
Mhm.
good thing, right? That's progress. But anyway, my point being like I think that we could, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Like we could, there's an argument to be made, I guess, that is like maybe things do have to fall apart for people to realize what what it is they did, and we just have to hope that our democracy is strong enough to survive this sort of thing, even some failings, so that we can get to another general election and maybe better people can be put in charge and that it doesn't devolve like some fascist regimes do where it does become essentially like tyranny and people don't have real choice and people are afraid to do other things, right? Like so you know I do understand like because part of me is there. I'm like, fucking let it fall apart. And then there's another part of me too, where like back to my anger, I'm getting great joy and hitting stop on every fucking text I get from the DNC who's asking me for money now or asking me for anything else. I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah.
you know what? I will
Yeah.
give you money in a couple years as I
Yeah.
have before. But right now I don't want to see any of your texts, and I sure as fuck don't want to give you a dime. And so I feel
Trying
like
to figure out which nonprofit came out the day after being like, "We're ready. We just need your money." I was like, "Hey, fuck you." I
exactly.
like, I don't
It's like
even know your
absolutely not.
plan, man. Like, yeah, I'm
Right.
not doing that. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Well, that's the thing too. Is like if you came out, if you were like, "This is what we're gonna do different, and this is why we need it," great.
Yeah.
But A, you don't have that now. Even the best equipped people don't have that now. And B, it's like read the fucking room, right? Like,
Well, in a way, it's no different. So in the days before the election, I got at the business I'm part of, we got an email from our liability insurance provider that said, "Do you have a plan for civil unrest?" And I was like, "Man, that's callous." I realize it's a cynical business, and that's a cynical fucking move. And
yeah,
that's exactly what I felt the day after when I forget who it was. It wouldn't be a shock to anybody, whoever it was, but it was just like, no, no, not yet. Now, I want to say a closing word about Tim Walz and the woman who would have been our governor, Peggy Flanagan. Yesterday, I watched again Tim Walz playing Crazy Taxi and talking about his Sega Dreamcast
love
on
him.
a Twitch stream with AOC. And I want to say that the thing that I loved about Walz, and I had a lot of issues with Walz, not about most of his agenda in Minnesota, but during the George Floyd uprising, it was probably like objectively okay that he sent in the National Guard when he did. Although that makes me terrified and very scared because I've seen that same National Guard in other contexts
Right.
and seen how quickly things can go from like, well, this feels all right to like, whoa, that's a checkpoint and you just killed somebody in a car. Um, but he actually, when the Chauvin trial was happening, he sent the National Guard preemptively, and I had a military convoy go down my street that was like one I would have seen when I was in Baghdad in 2003. And that was very, very upsetting to me that it was that easy for him to make that call when there was no credible threat of anything that would warrant the National Guard, and when you can just be responsive. You can be responsive. It's okay. Like, you can let in America, where we are allowed to protest, you can go ahead
Yep.
and just let the protests go and then
Yes.
decide if in your role with your mindset, your view on the world, do you need to send in the National Guard? Like,
Correct.
you can do that
Correct.
after the fact.
You
And
can
I had
absolutely do that.
checkpoints. I had basically checkpoints. I had many of the streets in my neighborhood, my pharmacy, my grocery store, my gas station. There was a Humvee on one side of the road and a Humvee on the other. And the thing I tired people tired of hearing me say, but I have seen it. It was like, I want you to know that two things. People would be like, well, their magazines aren't in their guns. It's like, soldiers are trained to get their magazines, their guns pretty quickly. That is a nice gesture, but this isn't like a huge point of comfort. The other one is, when you have a Humvee on either side of a street, it is just a matter of seconds before it's a checkpoint. And once you have a checkpoint, a whole new range of possibilities opens up, and almost none of them are good. And so anyway, that I was upset with him. Now, flash forward to me watching him play Crazy Taxi and talk about a Dreamcast.
You're like,
I was
fuck
like,
yeah.
first of all, Crazy Taxi is just not a game anyone references, but in my house, it is a beloved game.
Oh yeah, mine too. Mine too.
Just like,
Look, the trailer, we used to play it at my very first job, and it would just be that Offspring song and showing the whole thing, and so
yeah.
it was like 2 minutes of bliss because we had like these
Oh,
promo videos that we would run, and I was always so excited because I was like, man, I get to listen to good music at work.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but the game was so fun. The music was great. It was just this ridiculous thing where it was very similar to, in some ways, Grand Theft Auto 3, which was the first good Grand Theft Auto, where like you
Yeah.
could run people over like accidentally. And in fact, there were
Yeah.
missions in both Grand Theft Auto 3 and in Vice City, which were taxi missions, which were basically Crazy Taxi, but in
Yeah.
GTA.
Yeah.
And which
Yeah.
which is freaking
Crazy
great.
Taxi is like the equivalent of Oops All Berries for video games in relationship to GTA, where it's like
Yeah.
all you're taking out is the fun driving and the wacky people and the things
Yep.
that you can do driving down the street with people. You take that out, you leave all the other stuff over with GTA and the Vice game and everything else. It's totally, I just realized that it's the Oops All Berries of video games.
It totally
Um,
is. It totally is. But
but
but but, but
like,
it's so fun. It's so fun.
yeah, and the thing that I appreciated about him as a VP candidate was really that he was never someone who seemed like he was working towards that, and all of a sudden he was there. And
Right.
I'm actually kind of glad to see him not get sucked into the imperialist machine, even though
Yeah.
it exists at every level, and him being able to deploy the National Guard is a version of that. But what I'm really sad about is Peggy Flanagan, who would have been the first Native American governor in the country. and who is like objectively a good person, would have become our governor. And what is extra beautiful about that, and I don't think this is strictly cynical politicking, is that there's a picture I love. So I have this shirt that says protect trans kids in this like really like aggressive font, and then it has a knife on it and a rose on it. It's just a very aggressive shirt. And there's a great photo of her wearing that shirt and smiling. And I feel like if I could have had a governor that was willing to take the chance of wearing that shirt and then possibly meaning it, not with the knife, but you know what I mean? Like that would have been pretty amazing to both get Tim Walz to where he was going to be, which I guess would have been obscurity for 4 years, but and then to get her as a and so I'm grieving a little bit losing her, but I do, and this isn't something my circle completely agrees on. I am very happy to still have him as our governor. I think we're the only state that has a consolation prize in this election, which is to get him back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, when I'm happy for you, I'm happy you like him. I mean, and hopefully, you know, that she will have like next. I mean, so is this his second term or his first term?
it's his second. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe she can, you know, have a strong showing to be able to run,
Right.
whenever, you know, that this term is up.
I will
Um,
say she was one of the people, one of the politicians in the country that dressed as Tim Walz for Halloween,
Amazing.
which is just like,
Fantastic.
wow, I mean, maybe you do really like this guy. That's a good sign too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because when I talk about all this stuff, like I am someone who holds, like, I know we're both like this. You can hold two truths next to each other. One is that I don't believe that there can be anybody that walks into the White House and can do the kind of good that I would hope they can do.
No.
I was horrified and zero surprised, and have been, about the handling of Gaza, and didn't vote. Would never have not voted because of that. In part because that machine is rolling, and
Right.
whoever enters the office is being chewed up by that machine, and is too much of a sort of something to compromise to make, you know, meaningful decisions of integrity. Not to say it's not complex, but it obviously, there's a simplicity to that many people dying.
Sure.
um so I do hold also like this sense of like burn the system down, but I'm
Totally.
also like, that's Steve Earle. My son and I went and saw Steve Earle a few months ago, and he's very radical, and he's like, look, everybody vote. The election day is not where you vote your hopes and dreams and aspirations. It's a transactional affair, and so go do your transaction, right? Like,
Right.
and I really appreciated that take. But anyway, and I liked Tim Walz. Sorry if anybody's mad at me for saying it.
No, I like him too. I mean, if anything, I mean, like, look, are there, look, and I don't live in Minnesota, so I can't speak to what his, you know, time there was like as a governor. And I don't think any politician of any, you know, thing when we're talking about like governor, president, whatever, like even smaller than that can be perfect. And to your point, can do the good that we always want them to do. There's a certain amount of um, both like just realistic requirements of like what you can and can't control, and there's also a certain amount of like ego that's involved with people who are actually capable of reaching those jobs, that
Yeah,
they can, you know, interfere with maybe always standing to your principles, right? Like even I think
yeah,
probably our most principled president, Jimmy Carter, probably made decisions, you know, as a politician that were
definitely
that
did.
were
Yeah,
were you know, to get elected or self-serving or whatnot, and not just for doing the right thing. Because if you always do the right thing, you're never going to win, and then you can't accomplish anything, right? So I can
right,
recognize those
right.
trade-offs. But you know, I not having lived in his state, I wasn't familiar with him, but I liked him. I liked his personality. I did. Was a little annoyed that like it did seem like on the campaign. I mean, and part of it too. This is again me again. I'm in blame mode. I'm just angry. You know,
Yeah,
it felt like he was sidelined maybe to some extent during the campaign. Although at the same time, you'd be saying, well, what else is a VP supposed to do? Obviously he was not going to be able to outdebate JD Vance, although, you know, wasn't horrible, but he, you know, he
yeah, yeah. No, that
was a
wait, there's a podcast called the Says Who podcast. My friend Dan does it. He described that debate in the most beautiful way. He said it was like being stuck in a car with a fart.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, sorry.
yeah. No, you're exactly right, right. But what I mean though is that it's like, okay, so, you know, there we can make arguments like, oh, you know, he wasn't, you know, maybe used enough on the campaign trail run. I have no idea. It did feel like he was, maybe like a better surrogate before he was VP, but I liked him, and
Yeah.
I hope that this isn't the last we ever see from him, right? Like, obviously, the man is never going to be president, and I don't
Yeah.
think that he would even want to be, but hopefully there is a day when there will be like a administration or something else where he could play a part if he wants to. But at the very least, I'm happy that at least the people of Minnesota have what seems like a genuinely good guy who genuinely does care, right? And who's
Yeah.
willing to
Yeah.
like get on stream and fucking
Yeah.
play Crazy Taxi
Which is
for
how let's just
AOC.
go ahead and imagine him. Let's pretend that he's just waiting for the next big call, but he's doing that just playing Crazy Taxi in his basement while Peggy
Yeah, yeah,
Flanagan
yeah,
runs the
yeah,
state.
yeah.
He's just like, I need to rest. That's right, Jeff. I need to rest.
He's like, I need
So
to rest, and then they're like, wait, you've got to pick up, like you've got 20 seconds
yeah,
to pick
exactly.
up
Exactly.
to pick up your customer,
Yeah, that's not
or you
restful, is it?
lose. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, resting on the governing side, but not resting on, moonlighting as a crazy taxi driver in Southern California. Um,
Yes, exactly.
all right, so we've talked about all the things. Well, I've talked about the things that I'm mad at. You've been trying to keep me more in line. Do we want to talk about some things we're grateful
I'm
for,
not
some
trying to keep
gratitude?
you in line. Shit. I'm
No, I
fucking
know. No,
happy.
you're not trying to keep me in line. You're being more. You're like you're in a more healthy place than I am at this point. But that's okay. I'm good with my anger.
Maybe just externally. So yeah, gratitude. It's funny. Like I've been trying to shift my brain into gratitude, and all I keep thinking about is how I recently used something we that I learned about from you in gratitude, which is was it from Brett? Find any file.
Yeah.
It's just a great, very old app, and it's funny because I use and I'm gonna say it because I don't have anything new to say today. And I use Who to Spot for everything, but
Uh huh.
like when I want to search system files, like find a file is just right there. It's ready to do it. And it's been such a huge help to me this week, just based on the kind of work that I've been doing. So that's one bit. And then I'm going to do a second one just because they're both sort of repeats of past. So I've used drafts forever and ever and ever.
So good.
Um, but I only just finally sat down and super configured my actions and my like custom actions menu because I've always just like had a million action groups on there. So if I was doing markdown, I'd go to the markdown one. If I was doing whatever, I'd go to this one. I was just bouncing around. It was super inefficient and I could never find what I was looking for. And so I finally decided to configure and make my own custom sort of like toolbar that helps me do everything that I personally do all the time in drafts. And I don't know how it took me these many years because I've been using it for probably I don't, has it been around more than a decade, I think, but I've been using it
It's been about
for,
a decade. Yeah.
yeah, I think I've been using it since pretty much the beginning as like the place I go to where all my text starts, as everyone says. Um, but I've just been blown away because part of doing that was looking at what I might want that I don't use.
Yep.
And I've just been blown away by what I can do. My continued frustration with that app, and I'm sure there's a decent explanation for this, is that I can't use it like I use Envy Ultra or almost any other sort of text-based app that I like, which is I can't have a folder of text files that I can act upon from any app. It has to be in that app, which means when I search Who to Spot, I don't get things that are in drafts. This drives me crazy. But that's how much I love the app, that like I am constantly overcoming that total frustration. There's one super hacky workaround for that allows you to at least, this is the other thing you can't do with it. Now it's craptitude. Is you can't open your thing in an external editor. I can't open it in Sublime Text and do all the things I do so quickly for the last 10 years to my plain text. I have to paste it in and come back. And there's a hack for that that's really wonky or wanky. Let's say wanky. But anyway, all that said, I fucking love drafts, and I cannot believe really what a perfect app it is, except for those two things that otherwise would feel big to me. But because it's so perfect, it's not. So those are my two.
Yeah, no, it's a great app, and I think I've used some of those workarounds for a long time. That like I've been okay with, like, that aspect. But you're right, like it's so good, you want to use it everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, the automation stuff is really great. I also have to say, like, as just like an iOS app, like on my iPad and my iPhone
Yes.
especially, like it
So
is
good.
so good because the thing is that if I'm being real, I have a lot of options on my desktop.
Yep.
for doing any sort of note stuff. I have so many options, and so drafts is not always where I go. But
Yep.
on mobile, it's different. If I'm wanting to do something where I'm really wanting to do like, especially like a more, like markdown kind of centric, like heavy sort of thing that I know I'm going to be converting to other formats and whatnot. Like
Yeah.
I know some people like Ulysses, and Ulysses is great.
Blah. So
But
mess for me.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really work with, I guess, kind of my flow, whereas
Very
like
pretty.
is beautiful. And I think
Yeah.
that if it works for like your kind of like writing flow and your workflow, like awesome.
I
But
see
I'm
why
somebody
it does. Yeah.
but I am somebody who like I actually, like to have kind of my automations and integrations and see my markdown and like, see like what that looks like and type that kind of stuff out. And so I love drafts. And
Well, and oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I love it.
And also, since you're talking about iOS, like the thing that's amazing that is part of my toolbar, because I mostly use it on iOS, is like I can do the things on iOS that I can only do in VS Code or Sublime Text
Exactly.
otherwise. So
Exactly.
I
That's the
have
thing.
buttons that allow me, yeah, I have buttons that allow me to skip forward by a word, go to the beginning or the end of the line, move a line up or down, like the kinds of
Yes.
things you could never imagine doing on iOS. I can do with just a little button that's at the bottom of the screen. And that is incredible.
No, I feel the same way. Like, honestly, I think, like, the iOS thing is yeah, because, yeah, I can use any number of text editors and have, on Mac, right? But it was and I think that's why it was an iOS app first, and it's great that it is on the Mac, because then you can have access to all of your files and stuff there. But for me, like, it was one of those things I was like, "No, I wanna have" originally, I mean, this is how long the app has been around, like, it was kind of I was like, "I need my TextMate on, my
Yeah.
phone."
Yeah.
At least the way I use TextMate, right? Not so much as coding, but for writing. And with the action stuff, especially, it's just really, really good.
Hmm.
And big fan. Yeah, +1 on that. Great, great, great work. Also the developer is just such a great guy too. And so it's just, I always love to support
Always nice
good
to know.
devs.
Yeah.
Also another app that he makes, this is, I think this is a free one. I don't even know if it has any in-app purchase things. I think it might be completely free. But if you want a really good, a thesaurus slash dictionary sort of thing on iOS, there's an app called Terminology that he makes, and it
Mhm.
is really, really good because like the built-in, um, like thesaurus on macOS is actually pretty great, but there isn't anything like that built into the iPhone. And
Yeah.
so terminology is, and so it's awesome where, you have those moments where you're like, what's a word for this? Terminology is aces.
Yes.
So,
Totally, totally +1 on that one.
okay, so my pick this week is actually a little bit of a tease, and I apologize for this, but I did still want to give it a shout out. It will be available in a couple of weeks for everyone, but you can get access now if you join their Discord. So, I don't know if you are familiar, Brett, with Mitchell from the creator of HashiCorp,
No.
Terraform and all that stuff. Okay, so Mitchell Hashimoto created a company called Hashi Corp, which was then I think went public and then was been acquired and is worth lots and lots of money. And he stepped down from them a couple years ago and just decided to be a rich guy. And he
Oh, I know who this guy is. My son talks about him all the time. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
okay. Anyway, he has been building for like the last year. He's been building a new terminal emulator, like in public. And I know what you're thinking, Christina. You've talked about terminal emulators before. You told us about WesTerm like a few months ago. Like, do we need another one? Well, yes, right. Because as much as I love iTerm 2, and like Brett and I talked about that at length a while back, and as much as I give to their Patreon and everything,
Yep, it's
now
been
like I'm
mine
big
forever.
fan. Um, there are some things that it does that are slower, like, it's beautiful, but there are some things that just the way that it does things that are slower if you're doing a lot of actions and whatnot. This is where some of the Rust, based, terminal emulators are really great. Um, Ghosty, which is what Mitchell has been working on, it's actually based in Zig, which is, I guess, like, kind of a similar kind of it's similar to Rust in that it's very fast. But he's been working on making it like the most accurate, like kind of best terminal emulator he can make it, and it's also a native app, so it's available. It's cross-platform, unlike iTerm. So that's one of the cool things. So it'll work on
That is amazing.
Linux and Mac, and the Windows support is there, but it's coming. I'll be honest, I think Windows Terminal is pretty great, but it is coming there as well. He's been writing a lot of stuff on his blog, kind of devlogs about it, and he actually released a thing like 2 weeks ago, basically being like Ghosty 1.0 is coming, and saying that it'll be publicly released in 2024, December 2024, as an open source project under the MIT license, which is awesome. And then he kind of talks about how he wants it to basically be the best drop-in replacement for your current terminal emulator, Mac OS or Linux. And I've been seeing his tweets and I've been seeing other stuff, and I was like, man, how good can this really be? I joined their Discord, which I will have linked, because right now it is in private beta, but they are letting people in the Discord in fairly often. And I don't even think I engaged in the Discord, but maybe it was a week and I was given access. And so then I have access to the GitHub where you can file issues, but the Discord community is also really great of terminal nerds, very responsive to feedback. Daily updates are coming. And I've been using it. There are still some things that I prefer about iTerm 2, but part of that could probably just be like 18 years of using it. But I really, really, really like Ghosty. So it's free, it's open source, it's cross-platform, very fast, and the Mac app is native as fuck. So, there are, right now, the way the preferences work, it's a config file, and you can access that in the Mac app and kind of enter in what you want to enter in, but there's not a GUI. But if we can be real, the GUI for the preferences in iTerm is really not any better understandable. Like it, you know what I mean? Like let's be real. Like
I know it because I've been using it a long time, but every time I decide to reset, I'm just like, oh boy.
Exactly. You have to reset. And then in that case, you have to like find the plist file, right? Like, so in this case, like you have like it by default will create a config file in your .config folder in your home folder, .config/ghosty/config. And, you can then port that, to other machines. So you can, sync that with your .files and Git or anything else, which is really great. It automatically will pick up, like if you already have like a, like Oh My Zosh or Z Shell rather, Oh My Posh or Oh My Z Shell or one of the other like, managed things like customized, terminal, it should pick up on those settings automatically. But even out of the box, the defaults are really good. I like it. So Ghosty is my pick. And join their Discord because their Discord is cool. I was like kind of refreshingly surprised to see it's rare to see like a cross-platform community of terminal nerds, because usually it is just like the Linux ricers, and nothing against them, but like I use a real desktop operating system for a reason. And, I don't always want to like hear, about that stuff. So like it's a nice mix of Windows and or not Windows, Mac and Linux people. Some Windows people there too, but Windows is a little bit harder support wise. It hasn't been a priority, but they do have builds. So Ghosty is that was very long of me, but Ghosty is my pick.
No, I put that stuff in the show notes, including the Discord server, and I just joined the Discord server because I want to play.
Yeah. And I'll talk to you offline. I'll get you the latest DMG. It'll auto update. So.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Look, this is going to be MIT licensed. I don't feel bad.
Yeah. Right.
Being like, here you go.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Awesome. Well, I might get some sleep. I doubt it.
Yeah.
But I'll try.
I'm gonna try to. I haven't been sleeping well, understandably, but we'll see. I have a cold as well, so I don't know. I'd like to get some sleep. We'll see. But take care of yourself. And all of you out there, I know this week has got to be hard for a lot of you too. So take care.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself and
get some sleep.
Do whatever you need. Yeah. Get some sleep. And Brett. Most importantly, take care of yourself.
The system is going down now.